Hey, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Luke Belk from Astro Awakening. Thank you for stopping by and tuning in and subscribing and liking and following along and joining the journey of evolution. We've just gone through the Aquarius full moon, and I don't know about you, but for me personally, it's been quite liberating. It's been feeling like a lot of a lifting of energy, the heaviness of this sort of Cancer Capricorn energy we've been dealing with for a while. We had the Cancer new moon. And even though Pluto is back in Capricorn at the moment, we're sort of getting a lifting of this energy. And that full moon in Aquarius, fixed air, tends to sort of liberate, create a freeing energy. So we still may be living within the paradigm and the reality of where we were before, but the way in which we're living there, or at least our perspective, our objective perception of a reality has possibly changed. I know for me it has a lot. And, we're also dealing with the Venus retrograde, and that's been this reevaluation of a particular aspect of your life. For me, it's been two things, which is my relationship, my primary relationship with my partner, my relationship with my children. And both of those dynamics are changing immensely, enormously, but in a beautiful way. And there's a deepening of a heartfelt connection to those experiences in my life, and also a reevaluation of the approach I have to my engagement on my social media, how I connect with my clients, and the types of readings and sessions that I do and the support that I give has definitely improved, in the sense that there's been more conscious connection, there's been more compassionate consideration, and there's been more profound transformation for my clients. But it comes on the back of my own sort of change in my perception, my reevaluating, and coming back home. Home is where the heart is. Coming back home to the reason I began this journey. And I don't know if I mentioned this on here or another platform, but Venus is retrograde now. 8 years ago, Venus retrograde sort of ties into a really pinnacle point in my astrological journey, and really a sort of a change in my mindset from, that 2015, Venus's last retrograde in Leo. I had my own pest control business still, and I was a pest controller. However, I'd already started studying astrology and started sort of reading and looking into it and getting tutored and wanting to explore it deeply, and really starting to find it, like, the meaning to it, and like really resonating with me as a sense of a tool to be used for the evolution of the soul, the consciousness, the self-development, and just a better way to understand myself. And here I am now, fortunate enough to be in this situation, having turned professional astrologer in 2018. And I'm coming to this sort of cycle where I'm reevaluating, like, why I began. And because of the pressures of life and the economic pressures that people have on them, I'd probably drifted away from the beginning intention that I had when I started. So it's nice to come back to that. So the purpose of this video, it's 4 minutes in now. It's Friday, the 4th of August. It's 9:20 at night. I'm getting on here to talk about retrogrades, going a little bit of retro. And there's a phenomenon happening at the end of this month, from the 28th or 9th of August through to the 4th of September, where we're going to have all planets retrograde bar Mars and Jupiter. So 10 modern planets, traditional planets that we use. Okay, so that's the Moon, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, the 10 of them. Well, the Sun and Moon never retrograde, so that leaves 8. So between the 29th of August and the 4th of September, we're going to have 6 of the eight planets retrograding in retrograde motion, which is a pretty rare phenomenon. I looked through my ephemeris, right? If you haven't come across ephemeris before, this is basically just like your astrological Bible on alignments. and it's boring. It's not much going on in here, and every page looks similar. So if you've, sort of, what's the word, had a bit of a fundamentalist upbringing in astrology, you'll definitely have 1, 2, 10 of these books, which relate. This one here is from the 21st century, so from the year 2000 to 2100. It has the location of all the planets on a day-by-day basis, month by month, year by year, and whether they're retrograde, what sign they're in, what degree they're at every single day. It's a fantastic book. So I went back from today, 2023, back to 2000, and I couldn't find a time in that time period, 23 years, where we had all these planets retrograding at the same time. So it's a rare phenomenon. Now, I don't want you to be overwhelmed with the idea of, oh my God, everything's retrograde. In this video, what I'm going to do with the benefit of this carnelian or citron or whatever that may be, I can't remember, and I'm going to help you connect to a way to think about what's happening when planets are retrograde. But with this particular retrograde cycle, we've got Mercury turning retrograde. Venus is already retrograde. Uranus will be retrograde at the end of the month. There is a crossover, right? At the beginning of this year, we had Mars retrograde. We entered this year with Mars retrograde. Right up until March, Mars was retrograde in Gemini. Now we've got Venus retrograde, and then we're going to have Mercury and Venus retrograde together, but we're also going to have Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto also all retrograde at the same time. And then right as Venus, the day she stations direct to go no more retrograde, Jupiter turns retrograde. So for a little small period between the 29th of August, the 4th of September, we're going to have every planet except for Mars and Jupiter retrograde. And then from the 4th of September, we're going to have every planet retrograde except for Venus and Mars until the 16th of September, when Mercury will turn direct again and we won't be in the Mercury retrograde period. So you hear a lot of information about retrogrades and what to do and what not to do, and what that's going to mean. And I can guarantee you now, we're only in the 4th of August. You watch what happens over the next few weeks as this becomes, more promoted. You're going to see such a wide variety of people talking about this retrograde phase and all the planets retrograde, and people are going to be blaming bullshit, and they've fucked up stupid unconscious behavior on retrograding planets, as they always do. And this is why you're feeling this way, is because the planet's retrograde, and that's bollocks. Transiting planets only represent an aspect of consciousness, not the all. And we have to take ownership of our part to play within this great cosmic soup. So we can't blame external circumstances, i.e. Lion's Gate, allowing just one little period of time and one particular alignment to be it's an alignment of abundance, and we're going to manifest all these things. It's like you're externalizing stuff. So there is an understanding of there is external energy that we are part of, co-creating with this reality, but we also have our own sovereign fucking energetic perspective and makeup. So taking responsibility for that and realizing that regardless of whether there's a Lion's Gate or a retrograde or whatever's happening, we're responsible for our behavior and our actions and the way we respond to life experiences. And what separates us from animals and from the very unself-aware is the ability to choose how to respond to any circumstances. And the process of great transformation of behavior and the evolution of the soul requires that choice to be very conscious and to make better choices so that we can transform the way we respond and overcome shitty, dysfunctional, unconscious behavior that have been a result of our unaware process of evolution up until this point. So with that out of the way, what I want to talk about in this video is this: how to understand a retrograde, what's actually happening, different ways to think about it. We're going to look at Mercury's retrograde in Virgo. So Mercury today, on the Friday, the 4th of August, has entered its shadow. What's happening in Mercury retrograde? What is a shadow? And what are the best ways that you can personally tune into this? Because retrogrades provide a beautiful opportunity If you understand what they represent, there's no need to be afraid of them. People will say you shouldn't do things during the retrograde. Well, I can tell you now that's bollocks, because I have had huge success buying and selling motor vehicles during Mercury retrogrades. Massive success. I also know people that have done things under Venus and Jupiter retrogrades and had extreme wealth and abundance created. So if you know what it represents and how to tune into that energy, you can, navigate. Mercury, the navigator as well. So you can navigate. If you buy into the hype and the propaganda and the spin and the new age bollocks, it's, oh no, don't do anything, Mercury's retrograde, or just be an asshole and blame it on the Mercury retrograde, or don't be conscious of your reactions and behavior and responses, and again, be complacent and blame that on a retrograde. And it's like missing the point completely. And then we're going to sort of look at the a little brief breakdown of each of those planets during the retrograde phase. And then we're going to go beyond the retrograde and look at the big picture and what does that represent. Now, I'm also still putting together my astrological breakdown on the Australia birth chart. So if you've, hanging out for that, hang out. We've got time. It's really tied into what's happening in Australia in relation to the voice, the referendum with regards to the Indigenous voice to Parliament. And I'm going to look at the birth chart of Australia and also give you my point of view and perspective on what I think about that and how we as a collective can bring about transition and transformation and change in relation to what's happening, or we can just go, okay, well, that's how it is. So that's on its way. So for beginning with today, I want to look at what is happening during a retrograde. Like, what is going on? Retrograde. What does that mean? Firstly, understand this. A planet never stops. It never goes backwards. It never changes its direction. The planet continues in its orbital path. It's a set, fixed process. It's not slowing down, stopping, changing direction, going backwards. However, from the perspective that we have to observe this phenomenon from our point of position on Earth, flat plane of stationary Earth that we live on, it would appear that they do slow down, they do stop, and they do go backwards. And it is a observed phenomenon, but not a literal action taking place. So what I want to help you understand with my very limited, crystal and dinger for my, that's my chimer, is how to think about this. Because I find once you wrap your head around it, you can go, oh, that makes sense. And if you can make sense of something, you can understand it, you can rationalize, you can reason it. And then you can allow intuition and your insight and your receptive, conscious sort of expression of understanding, allow that to mix with your rational reasoning. If you can't make sense of it and your intuition isn't necessarily profound, you're going to be in a place of like, oh, believing the bullshit and the amplified stories that get presented and promoted through social media, as they always do. Lionsgate is a perfect example of that in relation to the hype around this energetic portal. Anytime you hear the word portal, if it smells like shit, if it looks like shit, it's shit. So let's imagine that this is the sun, okay? And that you watching this video are the earth, and you are stationary. You're immovable, inert. You're a plane of existence. You are where you live. You're your experience. In astrology, we use astrology and we sort of look at it from the place of geocentrism, which means that the earth is the center and it's stationary. Heliocentrism means that the sun is, and imagine this is the earth going around the sun. That's what the heliocentricists want to tell you and believe, is that that's the model of the solar system, is everything's moving around the sun. Well, I think that, yeah, everything's moving around the sun, but the earth isn't, because the earth isn't a planet, it's a plane. And we live on that plane. So if up until now you haven't realized that I'm a flat earther, welcome to the gang, welcome to the party. And can a flat earther be an astrologer? Absolutely. Do I need to know when it comes to astrology? Do I need to know exactly the understanding of the cosmos in relation to astrology and the way it works on a flat plane as opposed to a spinning orbital Earth? No, because astrology is not necessarily concerned with regards to the physical application of this. It's more of the spiritual, energetic, metaphysical application of astrology. So astronomy looks at the mathematical distances and working out what's happening and where things are. And astrology is looking at the impact of that energetically, metaphysically, spiritually. So that's what I'm interested in. So don't get caught in the semantics of flat globe or not, right? I think we live within a spherical system, but not on it, within it. And from certain perspectives that this system we live within would appear to be a sphere, but this plane of existence we find ourselves, I think it's flat. That's my opinion. If you don't, you want to challenge me on that, if you want to discuss that, I'm more than open. And it's not something that I've just sort of grasped out of some post or something that I've come across. I've studied and looked into this for quite a few years. So for the purposes of this video, you are the Earth, right, watching this, and this would be the sun. So I'm going to try and represent the sun here. And this would be the planet. Now let's begin this process with Mercury. Mercury takes 88 days to go around the sun, right? It's going around the sun every 88 days. That's pretty quick, zipping around, known as the god of speed, right? And the messenger of the gods, because he's never too far away from the main one, the main guy, the king, the god, the sun, the solar, the you, right? So it would perceive that when Mercury is going like this, it's going forward, 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 full stop. What's going on here in this zone, right, is it's not going forward anymore. But when it gets to here, it starts going that way. If forward is that way, then forward, 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 forward. Whoa, now it's going the opposite to forward. And now it's going forward, 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 backwards, forward, 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 forward. If we think that forward is this direction, then let's say that that's the direction the planet moves through the zodiac. It's in this direction. So it's going through the zodiac and then it's not. And it's going through the zodiac and it's not. Now, every time that Mercury comes around to this point between you, the Earth, and the sun, Mercury passes in between, it appears to go backwards through the zodiac, right? And it's only appearance from our perspective because we're witnessing it going this way, and then all of a sudden it gets here and it goes the opposite. It's going back. What's it going back through that way? So it's an illusion to give us this idea that the planet is retrograding, right? It's going backwards, but it doesn't ever stop. It's just that from our perspective, it's going around, it's forward, 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 it's retrograde. It's forward, 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 it's retrograde. It's forward, 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 it's retrograde. Forward, 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 retrograde. When the planet gets to this point here, there is a place, right, that it appears from our perspective to almost stop. It doesn't go forward or backwards. That's its stationing point. Right. So a lot of the intense energy of a planet is felt around that point because this would represent a degree of the zodiac, which where it's no longer moving forward in the zodiac or back in the zodiac. It's just in this zone. So that's its stationing. Now, for a planet like Mercury, when it stations, the influence of its energy is felt more impactful because the perception is like, what the hell? It just stopped all of a sudden? Rick Levine, he's an astrologer, a very reputable astrologer, has a lot of stuff on YouTube. But he likens this to this process of a Ferrari going, stop, and then hitting reverse and going backwards really quickly. So imagine you're a Ferrari, 100 miles an hour, and you go, stop. And then all of a sudden you're like, now you're going backwards. This is a Mercury retrograde. That's the effect of it. It represents Mercury, the mind, the intellect, communication, navigation, transportation. That's what it rules over. So anything that's under its governance energetically, when it gets to this sort of stationing point, can be amplified. Whoa, there's this amplification of Mercury energy. And then it appears to stop going in its forward motion and go backwards. It's not going backwards, but it's never stopped moving forward. But from the perspective you're observing it, it's going the opposite way in the zodiac, starting to retrograde back. So anything under the rulership energetically of Mercury is going backwards now. It's going retrograding, it's regressing, revising, rethinking, reordering, revision, redoing, you think of any reword, that's a retrograde, and that's what's happening. So it's an opportunity when this is happening to look at the things that Mercury represents and think, okay, it's time to sort of adjust that, rethink it, maybe do a bit of revision. Maybe I have to do a bit of reordering around that. Maybe I have to revise, refuel. Maybe I have to rest. Maybe I have to pause and just reflect a little bit in this zone, because I've covered now a part of the zodiac, which I'm covering for a second time. So I'm going back over a certain point. When it gets to this side, right, it's going to appear to all of a sudden it's not going backwards and it's not going forwards. It's going in this zone, right? And in this zone, again, it's going to have that same effect, and that's its station direct. So those points, the station retrograde, the station direct, for this Mercury retrograde phase, that's the 24th of August and the 16th of September. Either side of those days, a couple of days either side, we're going to be in these zones. So Mercury energy is going to be amplified. And Mercury, ruling the mind, the intellect, the thought process, the perception, the communication, the navigation, and the transportation, and the ideas, all of a sudden its energy is amplified, and then it's changed of direction. It's a change of direction. So you can be like, yes, maybe not. I don't know. Is that right for me? So the reason why people will say don't do things during a retrograde is because if you're in the retrograde phase and you make a decision that has long-term consequences or an impact on your reality for a long period of time, your thinking is in a reversed motion. Your perception, your ideas is going backwards, right? It's going through the zodiac. It's sort of like more of a not sure. So if you make serious decisions, commitments, make choices in that period, when you get to this point and Mercury starts to go direct again, all of a sudden there's a change of the direction. There's a change of what Mercury represents to the mind. And all of a sudden you might be thinking to yourself, shit, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't committed to that, because now I've changed my mind and I don't hold the same perspective anymore. It's completely shifted and I'm back to where I wanted to be. So that's the reason why people will say, don't do things, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. All I'm saying is you can do whatever the fuck you want at the end of the day. But be mindful in this zone of retrograde and the station either side that things are likely to change. So maybe that's non-committal because it's meaning the pace of like, well, I'm not sure. And maybe let's just give it some time. And what Mercury retrograde represents is this. And we'll talk about Venus and the other planets shortly as well, because they have different sort of cycles. Let's say you want to make a long trip you want to drive from Melbourne to the Gold Coast. Okay, so you're going to load up your car, you're going to fill it with fuel, you're going to get some food, drink, water, whatever, and you're going to get in the car and you're going to drive. But at a certain point, you're going to get tired, you're going to need to stop and rest, and you're also going to need to refuel. And Mercury retrograde offers an opportunity to do just that. Life is not a straight line from A to B. It's a cycle that goes up and down and around and around and around. So if we just think we can just keep going full bore forever and never ever fatigue, run out of fuel, or need to rest, we're tricking ourselves. Mercury, the trickster. We're tricking ourselves, right? What we have to realize is that from time to time, and especially when it comes to Mercury, the mind, the thoughts, the thinking, the ideas, our navigation, right? Where are we going? How are we getting there? Our perspective, our transportation, our communication. From time to time, we need to reflect. We need to stop. We need to pause. We need to rest. We need to rethink things, redo things, revise things, reorder things, right? So Mercury retrograde is the opportunity to do those things. Now, Mercury retrograde happens about 4 times a year because it's going 88 days around the sun. So, the sun's moving 1 year through the zodiac and Mercury's going around and around and around as it's going around. So it has this effect of about 4 times a year Mercury will be retrograde. Now, Venus has a little bit of a slower motion and she'll be retrograde every 18 months. But Venus is also an inferior planet. So when Venus retrogrades, she's also becoming between you, the Earth, and the sun. She's going to come between. So she's also going to come between when she retrogrades. And right now, that's what's happening. Venus is retrograding. Now, Venus isn't about thoughts. Venus is about values, loves and likes, relationships. So when you think rethink, revise, right, reflect, Mercury, when you think of Venus, you think of re-evaluate. To re-evaluate is to say, do I still want this? Do I still like this? Do I still have a desire for this? And reevaluation can be maybe I don't anymore, but also reevaluation can be I've wandered off track here and I've forgotten to value whatever the thing is. For me personally, Venus retrograde, this beautiful Venus retrograde now, like I've mentioned with regards to her tying into my astrological journey, she's also amplifying my natal Mercury, which is the ruler of my 7th house of relationship. And my partner and I, during this retrograde already, are deepening our relationship and reevaluating it, but reevaluating the way in which we deal with the relationship, right? Our process of connecting within the relationship. And there's this beautiful deepening that's happening that I can feel and sense of, like, we're just going to another deeper level, which is beautiful. My relationship to the work I do and the way I do it is also deepening. And Mercury's my planet that rules my 7th house, but it's also my planet that rules my midheaven and my sun, and is in my 9th house of the teacher. Has a lot to do with the way I see things, how I express things, the teaching that I do, the way I teach, my career, the work that I do. Mercury is a very prominent planet. This Venus star point, the Venus star point, and right, or the cazimi, or the inferior conjunction of the sun and the planet, is when it perfectly lines up. Imagine it's perfectly lined up like that. So you have the sun and the planet comes around like this and goes doink, and that point there is the inferior conjunction known as the star point of Venus. For me, that's directly on top of my Mercury. So this reevaluation and the way that I communicate and how I relate in my relationship and my work and my self-image, because it's ruling my sun, these are changing in a very profound way, but it's a deepening of this Venusian energy, which is love and value and like, and, you know, this beautiful aspect. And connecting in Leo is the quality of the heart and this power that comes from living from that place. So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. When we get to the superior planets, so we have the inferior planets with Mercury and Venus. We have the superior planets, which are Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So if you imagine Mercury's doing this between and then going in between and then retrograde, right? Retrograde, right? Well, now I'm going to do something a bit longer, because the orbital plane of the outer planets and the distance and the speed that they travel at is much slower, but much bigger, right? So let's just take now another planet, and we say, here's the sun, and that's you, and I'm on the other side, and now the planet is here, direct, and now it's gone into a shadow, and now it's retrograde. But guess where it's retrograde? It's behind the other side of the Earth, right? And it comes out again, and it's now direct, it's retrograde. So it has a different approach, right? So the outer planets, apart from Mars, we'll talk about Mars shortly. So Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto will go through a retrograde phase every single year. There's nothing unusual about that. Rick Levine, he would say that, like, if Mercury is about the Ferrari flying at 100 miles an hour and then hitting the brakes all of a sudden and then hitting reverse and going backwards fucking flat out, that's a Mercury retrograde. So it's like, whoa, what just happened? Sure, we're going the other way, right? So this is the effect of Mercury retrograde. And that's why shit goes crazy on a Mercury retrograde, because it rules transportation, navigation, and communication. Those types of things, experiences go, whoa. When you're looking at the outer planets, like a semi-trailer, right, doing 20 miles an hour, that just all of a sudden stops and then puts in reverse and goes back. So it's not energetically hugely felt. It's a subtle experience because the outer planets are retrograding so commonly in every year, and they're doing it, almost like you could set your clock to it. It's like, oh yeah, this is happening. The effects of them aren't as felt profoundly. But if you think about what's happening collectively on an energetic level with all retrograding planets, is there's this internalization of energy. And the energy, instead of being outwardly expressive and moving in a direction, it starts to regress and pull back in. So this is reflective of all of the energies. It sort of has this reflective type pull back within. So if you have 1 or 2 planets retrograde, not necessarily a huge thing. If you have 6 out of the 8 planets retrograde, there's this pulling in energy. There's this real shifting. It's almost like, when you've ever been doing things and then all of a sudden something happens, you go, like that, you just take that real, before there's about to be a real, So you could look at the end of this month, the 29th to the 4th of September, 29th of August, 4th of September, as this collective, I wouldn't be surprised if the powers that be, the marketing, the media, the governments, the corporations, the forked tongue of the matrix controllers channel into this period of time and up the hype in relation to the types of things that we could expect to happen. What's going to happen, right? And we might be in this place of like uncertainty. And it might just be because we are getting to this point where, that's right, we've got to pull back and just make a readjustment here. Something needs to shift or change the way we're doing it, the way we're seeing it, the way we're applying or approaching it. Like we just have this opportunity to sort of change. So when it happens as a natural phenomenon regularly, it's not something to be concerned about. It's not something to be frightened about or apprehensive about. It's something to be embraced as an opportunity. It's just a change of energy. It's change of the way things are. It's a different, pivot to the way things are going. Be mindful not to buy into the hype around it. If you want to understand it more personally, you have to tune into your birth chart and you have to understand where are these retrogrades happening. Are there any particular personal planets that are being impacted by these retrogrades? In what way? What houses are these retrogrades occurring in? And then look at the cycles of these planets as well. Like, when were they last retrograde here? What did that story represent in my life? And how is this now, what I'm going through, tied into that, what I have been through? And what changes and adjustments do I need to make? If you feel like you need to make some changes and adjustments, this is a perfect time to do just that. And this leads me to my final point I want to make. Before I do that, I want to just cover the shadow, because I know I mentioned that and I haven't really said what the shadow is, right? So let's say that this point here where there's going to be the retrograde phase, and it's never as, the retrograde arc is never as huge or profound as the direct arc. So in other words, it only represents a portion of the whole cycle. But let's say that when we get to this point here, right, before we turn retrograde, this point here represents the point that the planet is going to come back to, right, through its retrograde. Well, as it enters that shadow, it's entering a part of the sky that it's going to retrace, right? And when it retraces it, it's going to go through it for a second time. So as it enters the first time direct, it's shadow. Then it's retrograde, then it comes out of retrograde, and the final time it passes back through that period, it's its post-shadow. So you have this build-up, finale, like this, crescendo, and then the finale, and then we move on. How to understand and think about that is this. You ever been flying into the Gold Coast? You fly past the Gold Coast airport, you fly out over the ocean, you go up towards Surface Paradise, and you bank and you turn and you come back and you land. Right? So you're flying from the south into the Gold Coast, right? You get to a certain point, you get to like Coolangatta, and you go out over the ocean, you hit where you look over there, there's the airport, and you go past it, and you keep going. This moment you hit where the airport is and you look over and you can see it, but you keep going forward, but you're going past it, you're in shadow. Why are you in shadow? Because at a certain point, once you turn retrograde, which is when you turn around and come back, Now you're coming back to it, you're going to land where you've already geographically lined up with that point, even though it's not been the exact location, it's been in that aspect of the sky. So that's the shadow period. Today, 4th of August, 2023, Mercury's entered its shadow. Now, Mercury enters its shadow in the sign of Virgo. And Virgo is the practical application of our conscious energy, focused energy into the process of refinement, the most efficient use of our time and energy. How do we do things efficiently? What's the thing that I should do, and what's the best way that I should do it? That's what Virgo is concerned about. I'll give you an example of how that energy, I'm a Virgo sun sign, so how that energy plays out for me in relation to stacking the dishwasher. So, when you stack the dishwasher, I don't mind stacking the dishwasher because at least I don't have to fucking wash the dishes. That's great. But I don't like unstacking the dishwasher, because when I come to unstack the dishwasher, it's never because I want to unstack the dishwasher. It's always because I got to put a dirty plate and I realize it's fucking clean still. God. So with that in mind, when I go to stack the dishwasher initially, I recognize that if I just put shit wherever and I throw all the cutlery in, doesn't really matter, it just goes there. When I'm coming to unstack it at a time when I don't want to, because really all I want to do is put a dirty dish in, and now I'm realizing I fucking can't. I don't want to have to then go and sort out every little fucking piece and try and find it and put it and take forever to. So I recognize that the best way to overcome that is when I stack it, put all the knives in one spot, all the forks in one spot, all the spoons in one spot. I put the plates, I put them a certain way, so that when it comes time later to do the opposite, bang, I can just pick up the fork, spoons, and like that, put them away. Now, that might be OCD. For some of you, that might be like, yeah, that's normal. Right? You probably got a lot of Virgo in your chart. But for me, it's like making sense, because it's the most efficient way to do it, because it cuts down on the time and energy that I need later to have to undo it. So that's what Virgo energy is about. Mercury and Virgo now is about looking at your life, looking at your to-do list, looking at your habits and your routines and your ritual, the things you do repetitively, and thinking in terms of like the ideal you, the ideal life, the ideal relationship, the ideal work scenario, the ideal financial situation. And there is that you that lives in that place, right? But how does that you living in the ideal, how do they do things, right? And can you then refine your current routine, your current habits, and the way you approach things? Can you be like the person stacking the dishwasher and go, you know what? Yeah, I probably should stop doing that because it's making it harder for me, and I can do more of this and less of that. And if I do it like this instead of like that, then that's going to be much easier for me. Well, this Mercury retrograde, which overlaps with a period of intense retrograde, and again, Mercury was retrograde from the 24th of August to the 16th of September, but from the 29th to the 4th, 29th of August, 4th of September, we're going to have all planets retrograde except for Mars and Jupiter. So it's going to be an amplification of this retrograding energy. It's a beautiful opportunity to start looking at personal refinement, how you're doing things, how you're approaching them, and do you need to change the way you were doing it to make it more efficient for yourself? Right? Wouldn't that be the game? Less energy, less effort, more energy. Imagine less effort and more energy. You had more energy to do the things you want to do, to have the time you want to time. So that becomes down to like being efficient, perfecting the self. Virgo is about perfection. This Mercury retrograde, this period of retrogrades coming up, offers that opportunity. Now, this is my final point I want to say, and I'm mindful of the time. We're at 40 minutes already now. The mindful of the time is this. There's a lot of fear, uncertainty, doubt being pumped into the matrix at the moment in relation to the economic system, the cost of living pressures, the continual climate bullshit narrative, the World Economic Forum's fucking ideals about what they want to do with the world, war with Ukraine and Russia and the escalation of that, all these types of things. We have Saturn retrograding in Pisces. Saturn tends to bring a lot of the heaviness and a lot of depressive type energy into the sign of emotional sensitivity. We're very vulnerable. And what this matrix system does is put people into survival mode. And when people get put into survival mode, they get very conservative and restrictive. They stop spending, they stop doing, and they start waiting, and they start going, oh, what's going to happen? And they keep really simple. And that's understandable, but I will say this. These times represent bloody beautiful opportunities to do the self-work, to work on yourself, to refine the self, right? Revise, rethink, redo, reevaluate, reorder, right? Doing all of that work. The investment you make right now on improving yourself, your self-image, improving, your self-acceptance, your self-love, and doing the work of self-transformation, of soul evolution, right? Of self-actualization. This is when you do the work, right? So that when it comes time to harvest or reap the reward for effort, you've put the effort in. If you buy into the propaganda now and you become a little bit complacent and lazy and avoidance and distracted and escapist, and you just go, oh, well, what's the point? You're going to find that in time when things shift, and shift they will, it's a big energy shifts towards the end of this year into the next year, the next few years in particular, there's some huge dynamic shifts. Right now is where you do the preparation to take advantage, and opportunity presents itself for you as we move through those shifts. Or you become complacent and you get there and go, damn, I squandered an opportunity. So don't buy into the bullshit. If you need a bit of a tweak, a roadmap, if you need some support on what's the best approach for you and the way to go about it, then tune in for an astrological birth chart reading. Find out how this cosmic sort of dance impacts you personally. Don't buy into the continual propaganda and new age sort of promoted, oh, it's a Lion's Gate, or oh, it's a Mercury retrograde, oh, all the planets are retrograde. Like get clear on yourself. The chart is helping you understand yourself. You're not your chart. Your chart helps you understand you. So tune into that, and then you'll be forewarned, forearmed. You'll be aware, and you'll be like, oh yeah, I'm ready. This Mercury retrograde. This is what I'm focusing on. This is the work I'm going to do, because you'll know. And then you can utilize the time. And yes, you can still be conservative with your money and your time and your energy, but you're doing the work. It's the work you do on yourself. It's the changes you make in yourself that have the biggest impact on your life and the world around you. If you sit waiting, you're stuck playing the game. And at the moment, they've got you in a holding pattern, right? And you aren't direct or retrograde. You're in a holding pattern. That's what this system has done right now. Let's put everyone in a bit of a holding pattern. They've ramped up all of the economic indicators to slow down people's process of just, busyness, and they've just put them in a holding pattern. So in the holding pattern, if you're unaware, you can just be like, oh, well, now I'll just watch more Netflix or keep scrolling, or right. But if you go, oh, we're in a pause moment. Oh shit, fuck yeah. Dig down, do the work. Dig down, do the work now, and you are going to find that in time to come, you're going to be in the best place to take advantage of this next evolutionary leap that we are making as a collective. Retrograde or not, Lion's Gate or not, how are you preparing to take advantage of the opportunities that are coming? That's my video. Hope you enjoyed it. I love you guys. You guys are fucking awesome. And I really appreciate your comments and your likes and your support. And on that note, peace out.